Very good morning to you all and Dr. Chandrasekhar Kumar, Commissioner and Secretary, Employment and Technical Education Training Department, Odisha Government, Professor Nanda, Professor Chan, and Dr. Sunil Kumar Sarangi. My friends on the other side of the dais, some of you I have met, probably every year we will be meeting you, and all the invited guests. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be here, and would like to share a few thoughts of mine with you in terms of governance, which is a part of the overall theme subject for the day, and also about technical education. As I see, we can always have differences, but that's about the growth which happens. Growth always happens through differences, and if every one of us were to agree on everything, then we don't need you, you don't need me. So therefore, we need to look at the need as it exists and as it evolves over a period of time. Now, to start with something on the theme of the day of governance, I would like to inform you, which you all must have used as at the other end. I have implemented, you have used, and over a period of 5 years now, we have also kept changing the process to something that's extremely user representative and user friendly. Also, I would like to believe we didn't have anything. The fundamental part of governance is how do you reach that cutting edge, the person who is actually going to use it at the end of the day. Now, if you can reach him with the perception that he has, then probably you have won half the battle. The other half of the battle is the delivery of that system. In the early days, we are even today, many of the applications, we still have transactional approach to most of our initiatives, most of our activities. In AICTE also, about 5 years back, we had purely transactional approach. I want this service, you deliver this service, and that's it. That's the end of the story. Now, what happens in this kind of approach is there is a lot of scope for built-in corruption. So, transactional methodologies will need to move out from being transactional to being process-driven. So therefore, all activities that deliver services at the cutting edge need to be driven by robust processes. So a process can be logically decoded, and the process can be delivered by a set of rules. Transactions don't need rules. So therefore, or conversely, transactions over a period of time can keep evolving and keep changing in terms of their delivery and in terms of their rules. Therefore, you will have a tremendous amount of scope to build in corruption into the system. So you need to move out from that, make it process driven, which means you have to define processes, which means you have to come back to drawing board stage and define what are your inputs, what are your expected outcomes, And in order to deliver from these inputs to these expected outcomes, what is the process that you have, or what is the process that you would want to develop, and that process needs to be coded logically, in an algorithmic fashion. It needs to be expanded. And then you go back to the drawing board, look at what kind of inputs need to change, and so on. So over an iterated process, you will find that you zero in on the inputs, on the outcomes, and also on the process. So that's what we have tried to do in the e-governance project. Today we have about 12,000 institutions. Their complete database is there on the portal. You all know what kind of data you input as institutions. And as an outcome parameter, I'll tell you that the institutional database of all these 12,000 is there in the public domain today. Any of your document can be seen in the public domain. The application is completely RTI compliant. Now tell me how many processes, how many developments in the government sector are actually RTI compliant. Now I have 10 million student database on the portal. Okay? 10 million student database on the portal. Every student has a unique ID. I can send an SMS or a mail to every one of my students at the within seconds. Similarly, I have 6 lakh faculty on the portal, and each faculty has a unique ID. I can reach each one of them. In fact, every institution gets its data through the portal. You get all the updates, all the status positions through SMS, through mail, to your ID. Now that's the cutting edge. Now what happens at the back end to make all this happen is a robust process. And that's what I've been talking about. In fact, I have 8 terabyte data on the portal, on the data, in the data center that I have. Okay, 8 terabyte. Now, to manage all this data, I have a business intelligence tool which creates reports on the fly. If I want any report as to find out how many institutions are there in Orissa, in which district, how many polytechnics are there, in those polytechnics, how many teachers are there, what qualifications they have, everything I can get on the fly from real-time data through my business intelligence report. Now that's the kind of e-governance one should aim at, and you will automatically find that the corruption levels become zero. Today, you can apply sitting at home for a new institution or provide for a service to an existing institution. We provide several services. Sitting at home, you can make an application, and your final approval letter you can print sitting at home. Nobody comes to my office except when there is a serious issue. They don't come. I have 10 regional offices, but many of them don't even go there. So therefore, that's the kind of e-governance that we require. And I just wanted to inform you, because that happens to be the theme of the day. Now, having said that, I would invite all the institutions here to mandatorily implement ERP solutions in their institutions so that they become, it's not enough to maintain a website. Website doesn't provide you anything. So therefore, you need to make them interactive, provide downstream activities for your users through your portal. So that's what we are supposed to do. Now coming back to technical education, there has been a lot of expansion in the last 5 years. And the two most important paradigms that we need to look at is access and the other is quality. Access with quality. Now when we look at access, I'll draw upon some of my understanding on these two subjects and see what is actually happening in the country today, including Odisha. When I say access, 5 years back when I joined in the technical education space, I had 5.5 lakh students enrollment in technical education. 5 years back, 5.5 lakhs was the enrollment. In 13-14, I have an enrollment of 1.26 million. So it has more than doubled in 5 years' time. Which means that every one of you had a contribution in that growth factor. Why? Because in the last 5 years, the paradigm has really shifted from being a purely government-driven activity in the early days to now a private enterprise-driven activity. Today you have 93% of technical education in the private sector. It's a very good thing to happen. The private sector has to come into almost every single area to promote the growth factor of the country. Now that has happened, including this state. But having said that, there are several other features which are coming. The rate of growth of enrollment has been very, very significant over the last 5 years. Today people are saying that there are vacancies. I mean, there was a slide which said some 35-40% vacancies or something. The national average for vacancies is about 20 to 25. The national average is about 20 to 25% vacancies. Now if you look at a single factor of rate of growth which has really grown from 5.5 to 1.26 billion, if there are vacancies at the end of the day, why should I be bothered? I mean, look at the paradigm. I'll give you 3-4 reasons as to why I need not be bothered. You may have a different view. I'll come to that view as well. As long as there is a rate of growth that is happening, the bad ones will close, the better ones will prevail, quality will prevail. So what is wrong with that paradigm? Right? Now, suppose somebody says, don't let new colleges come in, don't give approvals to new colleges because there are vacancies in the existing colleges. Right? I'll give you a parallel to this. About 15-20 years back, we had just about 2 models in automobiles. One was the Ambassador by the Hindustan Motors and the other was Padmini by Fiat. After that things have changed. Today you have more than 100 models and every one of us wants a new model. I mean, there are people, there is a part of society in this world, in this country as well, which says every 6 months I'll change my vehicle. Right? They can afford to do it today because they are available and these people have the means to do it. Right? So today, if let's say a company comes forward, maybe Hindustan Motors or Mahindras or whatever, goes to the regulator. There are regulators in every field. It's not that things are just free, free enterprise everywhere. There is a regulator everywhere. So the automobile manufacturers, they go to the regulators and say, so many models are there, we are not able to sell our models. Why do you bring in new models into the market? Don't allow new models to come in. Will it work? Right? So you want a free enterprise, you want your institution to come up. Had the logic been that no institute will come up when you wanted to set up an institution, what would you have done? You would have gone to court. And what is the argument that you would have had? Section 19G of the Constitution says that I can set up, I can practice any profession that I want. It is my money that I am putting in. It is my land that I am putting in. There is no government source available here. And I am willing to follow all the rules of the regulator. Then the court would say, "Bhaiya, aapko problem kya hai? Why do you stop this fellow?" In fact, there have been cases where the courts have said, if there is a non-performing institute, to go after them. Why do you presuppose that a new institution will not provide quality? So therefore, you look at different perspectives of the problem. As a policy, if I come down and say that no new colleges, no expansion in this country this year, okay, which may even happen because of different forces acting in the current environment. What would those people do who have invested money and so on? Think about it. Now the third argument on this. What is our GER today? The national GER is 19 today. 18.8 is the national GER. I've been asking your secretary as to what the GER in Orissa would be. Maybe 14, 15, whatever. Out of 19 GER, today the technical education, what is GER? Gross enrollment ratio, measured between all those eligible students who go to higher education in the age group of 18 to 23. Some places it's 22, 23, but around that, right? So between 18 to 23, if there are 100 students available who are eligible to go to higher education, today in India only 19 go there, right? And out of that 19, 5 points, 4.5 points is provided by technical education. Out of that 19, the contribution of technical education is 4.5. In translated in terms of numbers, what happens? This 19 GER, it translates to 25 million students getting into colleges. And the total number of students who get into giving examinations between 10th, 11th, 12th is 50 million. Which means the passing rate is about 50%, which is a national average. Right? So 50 million students appear for exams, 25 million pass, and they go ahead. Which means every year, 25 million students drop out between 10, 11, 12, and so on. Two main reasons. They don't have the money to continue higher education. They have to support their families, so therefore they have to drop out. Many of them cannot do studies in the evening and not enough opportunities, all that. And the second main reason is they don't have any interest in the kind of education that is happening today. Your art, science, commerce, engineering, medicine, they are not interested in that. Right? So therefore, whatever is the reason, 25 million students are dropping out. Right? Therefore, what should you do? This 25 million, which is actually getting into colleges, is contributing to your 19 GER. Now, if we want a national GER, as my colleague pointed out, of 40, what should we do? How many more students will have to come into colleges? Forget about all that. The numbers will be mind-boggling to reach 40 GER of a national level. Suppose I give you a paradigm. Instead of saying that 25 million get into higher education, in a particular year I will enable the systems so that all 50 million pass. Hypothetical. Right? Instead of 25 million passing, all 50 million pass. Any number who comes in, they pass and go ahead. There will be an incremental change, obviously. More number of people will see colleges. Is that right? Get into colleges. Where will they go? They have to get into your current system, your current arts college, science college, commerce college, engineering college, and so on. If that were to happen, you tell me, do you have enough spare capacity to accommodate all of them even on today's infrastructure that you have? Do you have? Now we are talking about reaching 40 or 30 or whatever. The National Planning Commission figures is reaching 30 by 2020. Do you have in the next, what is 2020, another 5 years? In 5 years, you need to double and maybe even go beyond that only in terms of creating infrastructure to accommodate all these guys. Is that workable? Is that possible? So what are we talking about? On one side we are saying vacancies, no colleges, no expansion, nothing. On the other side increase GER. What is happening? Now, if you are increasing GER, obviously there will be a pressure on the delivery side. Where is the pressure on the supply side? Why are we not coming back to saying that improve the school systems, improve that delivery at that school level, get more students to pass between 10th, 11th and 12th, get the supply side changed, get more people into the system so that you will get more students. Instead of that, what we are saying is, today you create a examination system in such a way that I peg the passing percentage at 50 and then say that look, there are vacancies and neither do anything to the supply side nor do anything to the operating side. So how do you expect your GER to increase? How do you expect more people to come into the system? Or conversely, you forget about the current education system, create a new education system, new education paradigm, that of skill building, skills and education coming together, and provide an alternative education pathway to the students so that there is another education, parallel education system that comes up eventually, which takes care of these students who are dropping out. But either way, you need more infrastructure, you need more resources, you need more, and everything in the next 5 years. So please don't go into that mode of saying, today I don't have students, so therefore you create policies where everything will be stalled. I don't think that's the correct way of looking at things. You have to improve quality. Quality has several parameters. You have to drive towards improving the quality. Quality needs money. I was just making a comment, we spend more than 500 crores for IIT, and we are talking of 5 years, 200 crores, 300 crores for the entire technical education in the state and so on. So therefore, we need to relook at all these paradigms, and unless you put in money, unless you put in resources, quality doesn't rise like that. And you can't say that I have created a quality institution. Quality institutions are not created. Even if you put all the money in the world, you can't create a quality institute. You need quality students. You can't say that from 50% eligibility to 100% eligibility, everybody gets into the system, and then you ask the regulator, what are you doing to the quality? I'll give you a paradigm where quality can be improved in 1 year. I'll raise the bar from 50% to 70%. And anybody who has 70% and above only can get into technical education college. Believe me, the quality will improve. But can that paradigm be sustained by any political dispensation in any state? So therefore, on one side you say that you allow everybody into the college. Everybody should get to become an engineer. So, and once you do that, over a 5-year period, you have some kind of equilibrium that sets in, and the quality operates at some point, and then you say, what are you doing for quality? So these are difficult things to match. So quality doesn't exist end to end. Quality always exists at the top. There is a mid-level which has a potential to reach the top, and there is a level at the bottom where a lot of service inputs are required to improve the quality. So this is not in just education, it is there in every single field. You go to the entertainment sector. Do we even realize how many new channels open every day and how many new channels close? Has anybody gone against that and said why these channels are opening in the first place and why they are closing? But if one management school closes, they will come after AICT. What are you doing? Management school is closing. There are no students. Why are you allowing new college? Here we have a service sector, we have a government-driven paradigm that requires education to be given to everybody, and in that you have a different yardstick, or you want to propose a different yardstick, and in a purely entertainment-driven activity you don't want any yardstick. Let that be open to the public pressures, vagaries of life and so on. So therefore we need to relook all that we are trying to say. Employability, these are all very important activities. On one side we are saying that education should provide for everybody. On the other side we are nicely disconnecting the employment market to the education sector. There is no maintainable labor management information system available in this country even today. 90% of your market is in the unorganized sector. All the skill building, everything that we are talking about is in the organized sector, which is just about 7 to 8%. What are we doing with that unorganized sector? People are saying 25%, 30% engineers are only employable. Do you know what the Ernst & Young report says or the McKinsey report says? In a certain sector, for a certain job role, they advertise and seek applications. From those applications, they find that 25% are acceptable for that job role. Now they say, they use that statement as a yardstick to define the entire sector. Now that's not correct. If I were to look at it from the other perspective, I have, like I said, 1.26 million enrolling today. Even if I have 1 million students passing every year, and if I say 25% is employable, it means 7.5 lakh students every year from the technical education is roaming the streets, no jobs. Now that's not correct. So what must be happening? So they must be getting jobs, but probably undervalued jobs. Right? So therefore, the problem is not of employment, it is underemployment. Because of your such a big unorganized sector. And your lopsided development between your primary job sector, the secondary job sector, the tertiary job sectors, and so on. So we have to relook at our job potential, and therefore see that massive inputs go into that sector where the job positions in the country improve by many factors. We have somehow conveniently forgotten about MSMEs. There is a huge potential in this country for MSME growth. And there is a huge research potential available there. There is a huge job potential available there. But somehow everybody wants a Tata or TCS or Infosys or L&T or Siemens for a job. Nobody talks about even the development patterns that are required, that is required into the MSMEs. As the GDP, gross product, is growing at about 5%. Your rate of population is growing at about 1.5%. What is the difference? 3.5. That 3.5 is a rule for saying that is a percentage at which your per capita income is growing. Right? Purchasing power. So that is about 3.5. your inflation is about 8%. So what is happening? So if this GDP were to still fall, what really happens is people really do not have that money to do anything. So your economy falls, your GDP falls, all that happens. Which means that to stimulate this, your growth on the sector, the industry, the manufacturing, which is the secondary sector, the primary sector, your mining activity, your agriculture, all that has to develop. And your service sector has to develop so that they have a potential of 60-65% jobs. Your manufacturing sector has about 30-35% jobs. Your mining, agriculture, they have a sustained growth of 10-15% jobs and so on. So these things have to grow, but that primary sector and the secondary sector is so important to drive the tertiary sector. If we neglect our manufacturing, then things will die. And if you if you neglect your primary sector, which is so unfortunate in this country, the mining has almost come to a standstill. Now remember, these kind of initiatives will see that your entire economy will collapse someday. So we need to relook at all this. Research, yes, there are a lot of concerns on research. We have analytical research, statistical research, you have anecdotal research, empirical research, you have experimental research. But most of the people today are more interested in doing statistical research and empirical research and so on. Nobody worries about experimental research, and that is where this country suffers. Unless you create a postulation, you also experiment that, create some value addition, put it in the public domain, let it reach the industry. That's something that needs to happen. We had many fundamental institutions doing fundamental research, but they have never gone beyond that point. Today we are talking about research universities, cluster universities, meta universities and so on. The basic purpose of setting up a university was to create that interplay between different departments and so on, create interdisciplinary research, multidisciplinary research and so on. Somewhere we have failed in that. Today our departments are single teacher departments, 10 student departments in universities, many departments are like that. You all must be knowing. And there is no interaction, no research, nothing. And suddenly we find that after 50 years there is no research happening. So create a research university. Now this is, so you strengthen the base systems, strengthen the ground, then things will be built on that. If you are only looking at the Western paradigms, then it becomes extremely difficult to operate. Now meta universities, people say you will get a degree from here, here. But look at the logistics, look at the operational difficulties. But whoever prevented a single university from doing all that a meta university is supposed to be doing? So we need to relook at our systems. We have in this country 640 districts, out of which approximately 640, out of which about 200 districts have no technical education, not a single institution. Okay? Why? What kind of growth are we talking about? Expansion, access, all kinds of things we talk. But what is happening at the ground level? Now most of these states are terror prone. Not a single entrepreneur wants to go there. They all want to set up something in Bhubaneswar, something in Cuttack, something in, and so on. But if somebody would say that you go to a tribal place, set up an engineering institute, would you do it? But in city you will go and you will keep playing games saying that now don't allow new college here, now you don't do this, don't do that. But if you are told to please go there, there are no institutions there. In the entire northeast there are many states without any infrastructure. Well, nobody would go there. So there is a lot of thinking which has to change, and a government intervention would be required at certain places, a private intervention would be required at some places, and both of them have to come together to drive this paradigm. Finally, we need to, the change can be can be created, the change can be obtained through two processes. You change, you drive a change by change, which means don't go to drawing board. Those classic methods are all there. You create a plan, you could do this, you do this, do this, do this. 5-year plans, many of our 5-year plans are spent like that. Nothing happens. So you drive change by change. You say that this is what I want and drive every activity towards that. You will achieve much better results than change by design, by plan, and so on. So the only message that I have for whatever it is worth is we need to create systems which are facilitating enough, which have passion. People work with passion, but not just passion. Mere passion without logic is useless. You'll end up doing more harm. So therefore, there need to be people, there need to be mavericks, there need to be an understanding that failure is a part of success, and drive systems by change. Thank you.